While all this has been going on, Iran has been experiencing 4 weeks of demonstrations after the death of Mahsa Amini, a 22-year-old woman who had been arrested for not covering her head sufficiently. Iranians say this is the fiercest and most determined uprising since the revolution against the Shah during 1978 and early 79. But can it last? I spoke to Baran Abbsi, presenter and correspondent for BBC Persian.
These demonstrations seem to be the biggest threat so far that the Islamic Republic has faced. And they seem to be very different from previous protests. It would be easy to say that it's just another round of demonstrations that Iran seems to have grown accustomed to over the past few years. And we've had students' demonstrations in 1999 and the Green Movement in 2009 and the recent demonstrations, for example, 2019 and also 2021 over the water shortages. But these latest protests seem to be very different. They're mostly the younger generation, but there are several generations participating. It also transcends different ethnic groups and social groups. So it's much wider in terms of the groups of people who are joining it. It seems to be from people from every walk of life. And also in terms of magnitude, it's more widespread than the 2009 protests, for example. In every corner of Iran, you can see demonstrations at the moment, very small cities and also very big cities like Qom and Mashhad, cities that are very religious. And Mashhad is a city in which powerful clerics do not even allow some music concerts to take place. And seeing women in those cities taking off their headscarves and waving them in the air, setting them on fire and chanting slogans against the highest ranking officials in this state, they are quite unprecedented. And one of the differences is that it's led by women and it's spread to school children. As someone who grew up in Iran, as someone who went to school and university in Iran, even a month ago, nobody could believe seeing scenes like that. So they seem to be very determined, very defiant, and they seem to have lost hope in the Islamic Republic going through any kind of reform. So this is a movement for radical changes, and they've been calling for the overthrow of the Islamic establishment.
I remember covering the revolution against the Shah in 1978 and 79, and there was a definite tipping point. We're not at that point with these demonstrations, so are we?
The mood is revolutionary. The people we talk to and the people who are expressing their opinions on social media say they are looking for a revolution, and they're not going back now that they've lost the lives of their peers, and that they've lost faith in the establishment, and they've been so alienated with the ruling class who do not have their aspirations and the values that these young people have. This generation is the generation of the internet. They are connected to the rest of the world. They see other people having their personal freedoms that is considered norms in those countries, and they're deprived of the basic freedoms. And apart from that, because it's not just about personal freedoms, it's about the whole issue of a radical change in the whole establishment, because it's considered very corrupt. There's like widespread state corruption. There's the crippled economy, and these people say that they don't have any hope that any changes is going to happen.
Baran, is there any sign of any kind of leader coming out of all of this?
They suffer from the problem that the previous demonstrations had in Iran, the previous movements. They didn't have a leader and they were not organized. Although the officials say that it's been organized in advance, that the demonstrators were trained by the West, but it's very clear that they're very spontaneous. That might be the problem with them keeping the momentum, because they don't have a leader. But at the same time, some people say that it's actually more difficult for the officials, for the security forces, and for the establishment to crush the demonstrations because they don't have a leader. In 2009, they put the leaders under house arrest, and after a while, the protests stopped. But this time, every person in every neighborhood can turn into a demonstrator, can turn into a protester.
It does look, doesn't it, as though the Islamic revolution in Iran hasn't been able to kind of develop or sink real roots in society and so on. It looks kind of really old-fashioned and backward-looking, doesn't it? Would you agree with that? I mean, that there's no sign of any kind of political kind of development, is there?
Absolutely. The ruling establishment, they are elderly men who do not have the values that is adopted by these young people. They don't have the same aspirations. And it's not just that, it's the fact that they are extremely corrupt and that they have not done, they don't seem to have done much to give the welfare to the people, the economic development and the social development that the people demand. And they're isolationists. They don't have good relationships with the rest of the world. And it's all impacting the young generation who think that for leading a normal life, they need to have those kinds of social freedoms at the same time, be in a good relationship with the rest of the world to open Iran's door to the rest of the world. And they seem isolated and they've lost hope.
Baran Abbsi of the BBC Persian service. This is St Michael's Square in the centre of